did you ever, and by any means, headed in any direction previously when it comes to theory, theoretical texts or debates, discussions in the broadest sense possible? Anything that you can imagine, that you can come up with, that kind of comes down to a dispute or controversy on the level of argumentation, but also an exchange that is something you engaged in with and through words, and that is, in a sense, thought out due to notional work that could be by means of and with the help of written text, but it could be also like a conversation you engaged in, a outspoken dialogue with people. If that is the case, now the question that I would have is, were you ever stunned at some point about the sheer amount of written text that you find for any specific topic that sparked your interest? Were you kind of overburdened? Did you felt bombarded by, especially nowadays, the sheer amount of entries of text documents that you then also can search, that are available for search engines or for your specific search queries, through the possible access to all those texts, to all those writings, all those persons that kind of committed some part, at least of their life, to writing about this debate, be that whatever. I mean, they were probably also doing other things, right? But a lot of people, when you look into dissertations and books, they write books, dissertations, and they put so much effort into that. I mean, it's something that you kind of get an idea when you kind of look at different works, right? How much energy they spent into that, and how well a document or a text is kind of fabricated and constructed in terms of the architecture of the argumentation, but also the order and structure of the text, or the structurality or the systematicity, the coherence of the argument, and the kind of the quality of the sources or references that the author made use of. So, right, and if this is the case, if it's like a text of high quality, in your estimation, right, you see, or you get an idea how much the person who was writing this invested. Perhaps they were all invested, existentially invested, it seems. So, right, this could be on a more intellectual level, that it's more technical skillfulness that shines through, but it could be also like on a more existential level, that there is something, right? It seems that the text and the author is kind of driven by a urge or a necessity to write this, to bring the argumentation into this sharp form that kind of isolates, and in this way is kind of an experimental test setup with chemicals. In that sense, that could be the analogy, that there are certain positions that the author positions and brings into a constellation over pages and pages, so that he can excavate and really bring them into a chemical reaction on the interface, the reaction side between two positions, two stances, or maybe also more positions, and then kind of perhaps push against those positions, or make something, kind of look where it's going and what is happening. But then again, there are perhaps a lot of refinements that also express themselves through the strategic alignments and strategic yeah, like handwork, craftsmanship that is perceivable. Now, right, there was something that sparked your interest to this text, but it could be also like a specific author, a problem. Perhaps it's enough, right, to hear a notion, and you hear this notion, and then you have something spark your interest. There's a draw to this word, or as I said, to a specific question, to a problem, to an author, because it could be, right, that there is an aura that comes with this author or this text, that then sparked your interest, or it's perhaps a specific a specific movement that you heard. Okay, they kind of get a sketch of their positioning, and you were, yeah, something clicked, and you were just looking into and try to find out more about it. But maybe you were just also sliding into something, somebody, maybe a teacher, maybe some friend, some other student gave you a text and said, okay, just read it. It's really worthwhile, and it's there's something there, right? And you would just know by chance finding yourself in the situation that now you are in the middle of a debate, in the sense that you are reading on some texts or one text, and maybe you are watching some videos, people explaining or discussing the text, and kind of highlighting some aspects that the author maybe emphasized in their position or in their opinion. Something that is at stake there, that is really at the core of the text, or of the author's ambitions, the main thrust, the main impulse of the text, or the main trajectories that the text is making a problem, bringing a problem into a form that the readers can kind of comport themselves and understand what is the deal, at least for the author that writes this text. And so from occasion to occasion, that you were searching, and right, you were reading and trying to understand, so engaging in this hermeneutical exercise, and discuss with people, maybe get new impulses and new traits to follow, and new traces. You're right. You are kind of on the track for this substantial core, it seems, or perhaps you were also forced to search for the real problem, or the real question, the actual question. What is the debate over or about? So what are the authors driven by? What is their thrust? And right, you were trying to get a grip on the kind of topic, and where they are coming from, the whole context, right? I mean, the authors and the text, they maybe not just orbiting in free space, but there's something, it seems, they're orbiting around, or some kind of, of gravitas, some kind of weight to it, right? That kind of brings order, and it also structures, right? This is also that gravitation also structures, because there are certain attractors in this field, right? That kind of bend the lines and trajectories and paths and ways where you kind of come about, and how your kind of your search and quest for understanding turns in certain directions, and gets certain trajectories and certain impulses, or a certain momentum, a certain momentum where you kind of orbiting around a text, and then you are pushed outside of the orbit, and you get into a new orbit, or into a wider ellipse of orbiting, right? Because there's more width suddenly to what you are following there. And you kind of get a better idea over time what is at stake, maybe not, but what is to say about the text, the authors, the inner core of the subject matter they're debating over, or what they are fighting against each other, or what they are fighting about, or controversing about, right? As I said, it's maybe on a really technical level, but this could be also the case that it's more that you kind of have get an idea that it's also perhaps not on a personal level, that could also be the case, but really more on an existential level. And then if this was at some point something that occurred to you, something that happened to you, I wonder if you found yourself in the situation that you were confronted with terms like, with these strange composite terms like dialectical materialism or historical materialism or idealism, positivism, empiricism, just to name a few of these isms. And right, and you kind of wondered what are these terms about? Is it relevant? Is it irrelevant for the kind of direction you were heading towards, for your situation, right? From the kind of perspective that you're tackling, or that you're tackling the topic, or that you come from. That could be from social science, it could be from media theory, it could be from art, cultural theory, film studies, and so on and so forth, right? It could be all kind of possible starting points where you fall into this kind of space, and then you were maybe confronted with these terms, and you faced the situation to kind of trace these terms back, maybe, and you looked where these terms derived from, right? And maybe then you were confronted with further authors, with people that wrote to these specific, broader terms, right? That could be like specific kind of overarching notions that kind of indicate a specific position, like materialism or idealism, positivism, or specific stance, a specific approach. But that could be also like more broader terms, like being, truth, knowledge, right? Society, communication, interaction. And you may find authors who wrote over these debates, or that kind of bring up these words and write in terms, or teach in terms of what they are about, or what they are not about, why they are helpful, why they are not helpful, and right, in a sense, you're searching for an appropriate access. You would look, if you want to have some, you would probably maybe look into some specific dictionary, for example, a philosophical dictionary, and you would find some really good instruction, some really helpful summary, let's say, to the notion of the kind of stream of thought or theory or stance that you are kind of confronted with, maybe at the outset, only at the outset, but you know that perhaps it isn't really the full story, but right, it's maybe some traits to follow, and right, so and then you're kind of you find yourself in a situation that something right sparked your interest in the beginning at first, and now you are underway, and you are thriving. You have a certain momentum to investigate more. You're driven by this thrust of understanding and get your head around it, get a better idea of what the actual actual leaping point, we say in German, der springende Punkt, is what is it about, right? What is it about? And so now you can make a decision. You can, right? You can, or you maybe you even have to make a decision. It seems to really resolute and get full circles, so to say, with the topic and with your engagement in the reading. Or you just, right, you just hang loose, or right, you just leave it with the first summary of this dictionary that you looked into, and you have this vague understanding of these terms. So, okay, dialectical materialism, you have some definition that maybe was helpful, but maybe you just thinking, what the hell should that mean? What and how is it that so many people like wrote over the subject matter, and there's still, it seems it's not easy to be stabilized what is the meaning of this expression itself. Nevertheless, so many people use it, and this is the strange thing, it seems. I mean, this is a question, if you kind of found yourself in the same situation. So what is to grasp under this? What can we grasp under this notion? What is it that they want to get at, and that drove them to do so much research, right? To put so much of their energy into that. And you, as I said, this could lead that to you having a more resolute stance, at least at some point, and try to get some grip on that, some access. That could be any extent, right? It's a scale. So you can invest a whole lot of time. Maybe you didn't want to invest that much time, or you didn't want to engage yourself with every fiber of your body, or you just read like a madman or like a mad woman, which really, right, to get a sounded kind of understanding and comprehension. I mean, in a way that it's fitted for your own starting point, or where you are coming from, and what your own kind of fields of knowledge are, or of experience are also. What speaks to you. And perhaps you were deepening your topic, or the problem, or the question that sparked your interest, and maybe you also lose track on some point, and your excitation also may at some point, right, may decrease, so that you found yourself saying, okay, I leave it. It's just hell of a interwoven and complicated stuff, but maybe it's also, you have the impression that it's complicated for being complicated. So it's just you know, a theoretical game, or just some academic game where there's not really something you can get at, but people are just driving themselves mad for positions, for hierarchy, for power, or for language games, where there's nothing substantial there, nothing that can be really said about it. So this could also be some dead end where you find yourself temporarily. But then again, something brings you perhaps back, and doesn't leave you alone, and you are, you know, you there are some traits that draw you in again. And but maybe you also find yourself in a situation that you have the feeling that you totally understood what was going on there, and you could really relate to that. In a sense, you were searching you were searching for something like this idea of what historical materialism kind of get at, what this notion comprises or grasps under its thrust. And then you perhaps found that it's about some form of radical historicity, and that there is this real primate of social reality and of class struggle. And this is where where you have the feeling, or where you kind of you could really get your own thoughts into the alignment with what is going on, and you have the feeling that you really get at the flesh of the matter, taking grip on the substance in quotation mark. So at what the debate is over and about, so that you can disclose by reading and following, uncover certain traits that make it in a sense not fully transparent, but that lets something shine through, and that helps you see through, or kind of intuit through these notions, and so that you can make use of them and integrate them into your own speaking, without giving them significantly too much weight, so that you can use them with some fluent tongue, with some flow, and foster discussion, right, that spark your interest and the controversy, and you kind of get a better idea and some momentum on why people invest so much of their time writing dissertations, writing whole books, and investing great part of their lives, right? But still, you could be ending up just being blown away by looking at that, right? That people become parents during writing, and doing their research projects for decades, writing books, and maybe even dedicating their life for a topic. So confronted with all this existential weight, and all this effort and pain, also that is not visible in these texts, but that speaks through these texts, and that you kind of can comport yourself towards while you having experienced yourself how much pain writing is, and how much existential crisis you go through while trying to understand. And right, and so still you have the feeling that, okay, there's really heavy stuff there going on, and there's a lot of sharp minds engaging into the discussion that can make it easier, can make life easier on these grounds, because some people have great abilities to put especially hard and complicated themes or motifs or topics, thoughts, into some comprehensible form, and really ground them, in a sense that they not make them too simple, but they bring them down from the totally abstract sphere, where only like the super experts can still make the association and connections of what is going on, and follow the discussion. And maybe these are also like people that can help non-experts to enter into this field. Maybe there's a tendency that they are people also that kind of move against the stream of flow of like opinions that are settled. So because they have the ability to not make this a knowledge only for the authorized, only for the ones who bleeded blood, and kind of have this existential invest, but open the discussion and put themselves out of this position of the subject of knowledge. So, there are commonly negotiated some forms of positions that are kind of seems fixed, or that there seems that can also lead to a stifling or to an institutionalization of some position or some stance, right? And that might be the death for a discussion, or for a real conversation, and an engaged conversation, and in discussion that is open for movement, for new approaches, better ideas, or ideas that tackle also the established way of putting things in a certain state of affair. So, and having said all this, right, the experience you made is maybe something like that you found that these authors are coming from somewhere, right? They are studying all kinds of relevant authors and other disciplines from the past, and maybe the history of the field or their discipline. So they're not entering from, thin air, at least most probably. No, not from nowhere, but they have certain teachers, and you can contextualize where they're coming from, and this helps you to understand what their impulse is, their drive, and the direction in which they're heading, to a certain degree at least. But then again, you may still ask yourself, okay, why they really go full stake at one point, so to say. They fully invest and they discuss over something with as if their whole life is invested, it seems, or it may seem, because the experience you're making is that it seems so important for them, for several reasons, that can be many reasons, right, that they they put everything in, they throw off themselves into this theme and into whatever occurs by doing that, right? And something that you might also encounter is that kind of you get a notion that not all the ways leading to Rome, but leading or there's a kind of leading of threads spinning together in a field or in a discipline, right? And they are all, it seems, orbiting around this this thing which is called philosophy, or this no thing, because it isn't really a thing, but it's a notion, first of all, right? Simply for the reason that a certain hanging together is to be the case for a lot of a lot of notions from different disciplines or different approaches, like positivism, empiricism, idealism, materialism. They all have a certain relevancy for philosophy and in terms of philosophy, most probably, or they directly derive maybe also from a philosophical debate, right? They kind of have a backdrop or some baggage, and kind of emanated from if not from philosophy as a pure discourse itself, but from some collision between different fields, like, let's say, between social science and philosophy, or philosophy and media theory, or it's a clash between biology and physics, and then a certain person that is trained and skilled in philosophy has also written something about it. So, right, and if you still can follow that, and maybe you can relate to that, or maybe not, but you realize maybe that these people are fully invested, and you pay great amounts of the energy to the debate, to the controversies, and in kind of last instance, or at least on a fundamental level, they also have to draw on notions that are also philosophical notions, at least. So, right, there's always the chance that authors, kind of researchers, ignoring the kind of backdrop of the notions, and this may be also of great productivity, that they don't pay attention to the kind of philosophical baggage that these notions bring with them, or they are perhaps not even aware, right, that about about the threads that these notions spin, and you know, kind of weave to philosophy. And right, and then they have their own field. Maybe they have their own methods, their own idea of how rigorous research is done and conducted, and how one should, you know, argument in a reasonable way, how rationality can be safeguarded or achieved, and kind of how to explain yourself right in terms of what you are doing there in terms of research, and giving kind of reasons or engaging in argumentation. Reflect about your own investigation, your method, your choice of materials or selection of specific sources, and so on and so on. I mean, this all depends on the discipline that, right, these persons are invested in, or where they are doing the kind of text work or research work, and right, what their kind main thrust is, and they're kind of where they are tending to, or what their tending questions are. So at some point, probably these authors will come to the conclusion, maybe, but at least get some idea or some suspicion that it would be necessary to need to look into philosophy, or yeah, kind of philosophical texts and the history of philosophy, or into the backdrop of a notion, to really get the argument fully going, or to really get into the full flesh, or at least in a better position in terms of their own controversy. And they are engaging, right, perhaps in in some question, some theme or topic, and they're using terms, right, that may be political, loaded terms, or aesthetically loaded terms, or ethical terms, or arguments, or ideas, right, and they work out and build or construct the argumentation around these terms, or around these ideas. And as researchers, at some point they look for their assumptions, maybe, and they find themselves that they have perhaps some philosophical position going on there, or implicitly invoked some philosophical position. But why should they be drawn to philosophy? Well, mainly also because the logic that they are drawing on, in terms of conveying their argument and engaging in argumentation, discussion in a reasonable way, and you know, there's already emphasis on reasonable. So reason itself is a notion that hinges on philosophy, or draws back to philosophy, that calls philosophy on the stage. And you know, the logic that they are drawing on, right, is already something that kind of necessarily brings them in the midst of philosophical debates, namely logic as some specific aspect, or some specific root discipline of philosophy. So they are drawing on something which is is at least in the philosophical discourse, a ground notion and a ground threat. And this could be a kind of signpost that lead them toward philosophy. And then you can say, okay, why should I engage with that, right? Aristotle developed a formal logic, perhaps Kant developed a transcendental logic, right? Examining and sorting out and measuring out the conditions of possibility, of experience in the most general sense, and in that sense also grounds or excavates logic on a deeper level. And then, right, Hegel is doing some engaging in some form of, or unfolding some kind of dialectical thinking, some kind of dialectical logic that is governing, or like is giving kind of is setting up the principle of his thinking, or is the principle of his thinking, shows itself to be the principle of his thinking. And you could say, right, as maybe some researchers say, okay, this is just a tool set for researchers, for the theorists. So there are some philosophers who do the groundwork in logic, and other theorists can take up what is produced there, and just make use of state-of-the-art logic, as you would make use of state-of-the-art software that you also don't know exactly how it is built and why it is made up like this, designed like this, etc. Why the architecture of this program is looking like this, but this is state-of-the-art software, so you are not only allowed, but you are even it's kind of necessity of the market to use it, right? Because somebody else backed them up in terms of doing the necessary discussion on why this is the groundwork, or perhaps not even doing discussion, but in terms of, for example, software, it's right, the market decides. Kind of the market logic, or the sheer how many people are are downloading the software, for example. So, and you have the logical work inside of the foundations, right? And then are other people, they're using it in terms of their reasoning and argumentation. But nevertheless, and perhaps their kind of discussion, or their field of relevance where they are engaging in, their specific subject they're engaging in brings them to a certain point where the fundamental notion of the subject itself are shaken or shattered in a sense, or are getting, it seems are standing on shaky ground, or there's a certain movement happening between these fundamental notions that they are shifting, and that they are more and more unclear of what they actually mean and what their conceptual content is. So it seems that maybe that they are not standing on the stable ground that people thought they stand, and what a certain suspicion may be going on, a certain doubt that we can still go with this fundamental notion, at least in the same, the same certainty, or the same kind of, how you say, with the same ease that we did before, right? So, for example, in biology, the fundamental notion is perhaps life, probably organism. Then for physics, it's space and time, and perhaps something like matter and causation. And for social science, perhaps society, communication, interaction. So every field has fundamental notion, and they may get shaken, like, for example, in the field of physics, space and time with Einstein, or even with Newton. And when somebody touches this, or even when it's not that one person touches this, but when the discourse, the discussion, and the positions that are unfolded, or that are driven by some scientists, by a research community, bring movement into the fundamental notion, or shake them, but also with it the fundamental principles. For example, in physics, on measurement or something like that, kind of what put into question the fundament of the field itself, it seems, or at least make it possible to think after and send a question back to the kind of the origin, the principal trait, the root of the field itself. And if not already earlier, but at this point you would say, okay, this is like a big signpost to kind of look into your fundamental notions, and that you're kind of dealing with, or that your field and your the area that sparked the interest of you initially, you know, that they are make use of, that they are grounded on, that they are find their stability on, and that they build their whole system and their whole method onto, maybe. So maybe it's in some discipline it's more the method that is the driving principle or the founding principle. So, but right, you get a kind of handle of what I'm getting there at, hopefully. And now the new, right, there are some new insights or new measurements or something else that is invoked that brings a new certain, or at least brings a kind of necessity with it to question the direction that was previously taken, and this in regard of the you know, new kind of fragmented horizon that suddenly opened up. The you know, the splitters of the turbulences that were going on, and in terms of the field, the discussion, the controversy, and so on. But when you find yourself in that situation where the discussion or debate, you know, brought you first in, and then first into the really problematic space where problem is to be understood as something that is not fully presence but also not fully absence. So it's always this boundary against which you are working, and which on which event horizon there are new it seems you know, new emergent vectors going on, or turbulences and attractors influencing the kind of event horizon on this boundary, and that kind of break up and yeah, make again liquid the you know, perhaps stiff and fixed positional war that were going on before. And right, so from this stationary situation to a more dynamic situation, right, that also brings with it a certain uncertainty, a certain contingency, right? So but at least there's no like before, there was no real exchange because the positions seemed so fixed. But now, as the fundamental notions, the fundament itself is shifting or is in movement, while due to the fundamental notions not having their fixed meaning anymore, it seems that now there's again some space, some leeway for real exchange of ideas. That could be the case, right? So a kind of a leeway for real discussion and opening up. And maybe it's time, you know, to access the problem from a different perspective, to get a new person working on it, or a new team of, you know, interdisciplinary researchers, to bring up new contexts, new backdrops, new kind of you know, striving towards and against this boundary, this side of the event horizon, so to say. And you know, some fresh new looks, perhaps also new methods. This can all be the case. And at this point where your signposts are, it seems, pushing you or committing you in some sense to open up the debate and kind of the argumentation, to open up the debate and rethink your argumentation. This is what I wanted to say in new theoretical terms or in a new language, at least partially or temporally. Unfolding is pushing you into that direction of philosophy. And then the question maybe come up, like how to get a kind of grip on these notions in a philosophical sense. For example, idealism, materialism, right? The whole kind of backdrop, that is invoked there. And yeah, so right, so you are you worked yourself through, and you found yourself, not only is the discussion, is there a whole lot of momentum in the discussion, but now the discussion also needs to take into account that it's not isolated, right? Or it cannot be isolated, because we find that the fundamental notion are itself in a relation to some form of of philosophizing about these notions. And in German, we when we speak about the human sciences, for a long time we were using the notion, or we brought up the notion Geisteswissenschaft, which is the science of spirit. You could make the translation, one-to-one translation. So, right, in the English vernacular, we speak about liberal arts or human sciences. And now the science of spirit, that brings really something up, right? That brings up perhaps Hegel, right, with the notion of spirit, even if one would have to look into what Hegel then means by spirit. But this notion itself seems, right, it seems kind of dislodged for us nowadays. Also institutional wise, that we not use it that easily anymore. And the question is, of course, why this is the case, and how it is connected to this opening up, or this occurrence that the fundamental notion draws toward this no thing that is called philosophy, or this way of philosophizing. So, right, but and this can come about with any kind of notion, right? It can be with like empiricism, which is also kind of a stance, a method, right? So that you find it, okay, where is empiria coming from? You trace it back maybe to the ancient Greek, and you find that there are certain philosophical lines of argumentation, certain authors who brought up this notion, maybe in a really different sense. And right, and on studying these things, or phenomena, or state of affairs, right, you find you may find that there was initially some not totally dislodged sense to that notion, but you may observe that nowadays this notion have shifted. So, for example, positivistic, in a more and more positivistic sense, in terms of empiricism, that there is a certain way of sharpening the notion, or of making it more handleable, and more bringing it more in an operationalizable form. So, and in the sense that the scope of possible objects of study is limited to what is measurable, right? What is in a positive sense distinguishable, and can be fixed in terms of a measurement, right? So there must always be something that can be measured, that can be positively stated as fact, and that can be stated as fact precisely in the sense that somebody else can repeat the same measurement or the same experiment, make the same observation, the exact same observation, for example. So, and now with this example of repeating an experiment and get the exact same result, right? There seems to be something at odd, something differing from liberal arts, from the Geisteswissenschaften, from the spirit of science, where there's really much going on in terms of studying literature, or studying culture, cultural form, cultural expressions, and human activities in a more often expressionist sense, or perhaps also like something like an impressionistic sense. So ways of enveloping and expressing what it means to be, or what it can mean to be human in a certain age. And and the liberal arts, the human sciences, are, it seems, engaging in understanding these ways and manners and thrusts of human activities, cultural forms, and what their nexus is, how they hang together, or if there is something that is working itself through there, that is kind of conceivable in terms of if not a continuation, but a certain thread that is weaving itself through these forms of expression, running through all these different forms of let's say, human activity, the enveloping and folding of spiritual activities, for example, kind of practices of religion, right? How they are kind of taking place, and how there are differences in different times and between cultures, and in a sense also how they produce place and a world that we can inhabit and that we do inhabit. So, right, of course, there is then a scissor, it seems, between different approaches or different frontiers, different cultures. Maybe there are also commonalities, right, or a shared history, or a shared history of certain activities, practices, or beliefs, ideas, right? And but you find that it seems, right, there is a certain a certain distance, it seems, between this rigorous kind of controlled work, for example, in the laboratory, conducting experiments in a really highly controlled setup, and on the other side, you have something, right, some engagement in the human sciences, liberal art, right? They have also developed methods, and they're also pretty much serious and rigorous. Some, at least, some research, and but then again, you have also disciplines where you have something that's called in German Methodenfreiheit, which is like freedom of method. And this is something like, right, you're still bound to the fundamental scientific kind of code of conduct of how to do science and what is necessary for do like sound scientific research, but right, in the most general sense possible, like this kind of the fundament of science. But then again, when it comes to the more detailed account of what you're doing there, and how to follow your question, the problem that sparked your interest, you can choose freely about the method that you bring into the equation. And this is something that maybe also is also thinkable in terms of natural science, but at least it seems more restrictive, the natural sciences, in this respect. And right, nevertheless, there are also new methods that are yeah that are developed in terms of natural sciences, or then again, right, the exact sciences, and then with the primate position of mathematics as the most exact science, or physics as the most exact natural science, as being applied mathematics, or being the study of nature, of movable things and the order of things with in the language of mathematics, the most exact of the sciences. So, right, and in mathematics, what is striking is, and this is also something you may find, that, right, mathematics can study ideal objects. It can study only relations, for example, in topology, and it can calculate, it can count in terms of algebra, it can calculate geometry, kind of, right, specific systems of equations. So there's all kind of things going on there, it seems, and it's really hard to make the nexus and to bring this into an overarching conceptualization, how this fits into, right, the natural sciences having to deal with empirical objects of observation, of measurement, and then right, also with the human sciences, where you have maybe have more something like cultural objects, artifacts, or then again perhaps, you know, something like psychology at the border of natural sciences and human sciences, where they study, it seems, kind of, you know, psychic objects or mental objects, and there's a certain challenge there, certain yeah, we'll leap to make to bring that into a conceptualization, right, and also that you have theory on the one side and praxis on the other, and that is kind of it seems people are speaking about a scissor, a theory praxis scissor, like, and how can it be that you, right, that you develop notions theoretically, and then you apply them, you apply theories, and you put, or you develop, and yeah, come to think about concepts, or bring up concepts and put them on the test bed with physics, right? To make then experiments and experimental test setups, and you can make kind of the analogy also with this being the case in terms of, you know, notional work, that you come up with concepts and you follow ideas and work out ideas, and you bring them into, yeah, different experimental test setups with different authors, different texts, different ways of tackling a problem, and then you kind of look what is happening, what is occurring there, and yeah, kind of yeah getting your head around it, and let your let your intellectual capacities work on that, and right, and it all seems then the whole scientific project seems to have to do something with giving reasons, right, in terms of correlation or causation, for example, and then also, right, with giving exact proofs in mathematics, or at least giving a sound, coherent, and consistent argumentation, right, that and it seems that is also something that can help us in everyday life. Well, going about our everyday life, that we have you know, certain things we found to be consistent and arguably a position that one can hold, or something that can be applied, and we found ourselves, we experience ourselves in terms of mathematics, for example, that it's working, and we gain a certain control over, you know, the amount of money we spend, or we can calculate to a certain degree situation when it comes to know you know, weighing up certain um, weighing up certain possibilities, and their chance, how likely it is that they will take place, or that the situation will turn out like this. So we can do certain predications, certain predicaments of the future, it seems, at least to some degree. And mathematics has a strange role when we come to think about it, right? But it's tending perhaps more to the natural sciences. But of course, when it comes to philosophy, right, philosophy always had an eye on mathematics. Was always forfeiting an eye on mathematics and kind of looking for its super exact and highly coherent, consistent building and architecture, right? Architectonic, so architecture as a system. And it's kind of working like a super mechanically smooth machinery. I mean, it's a bit over exaggerated because there's so much work going on in terms of fostering or like testing mathematical concept, and so much also like experimentation, right? And then you have something like psychoanalysis as an occurrence or a yawning gap, it seems, between the natural sciences and human sciences, liberal arts, which also found itself to be some obstacle to to the university or university institute. So there's a certain problematic trait to institutionalizing psychoanalysis for certain reasons. Why is this the case, and what kind of delicateness of problem is at stake there, right? Is to a certain degree and a certain point discussed in the 20th century. So psychoanalysis said to be only something that could occur in so-called modernity. And right, it's really interesting to and to find all these traits to follow, all these tracks and paths and certain orbits, right? And this is now I want to flesh out a little bit more what maybe this event horizon that is opening up there, and at least as I encountered it. And now it seems that right in the 20th century we have this movement by the mathematician, but also then trained philosopher Edmund Husserl, which he called phenomenology himself. And right, Husserl, he was really driven and to a high degree, devastated by the kind of by the finding that it, for him, as he encountered it or as he conceived it, the foundation of the science themselves were in a sense not secured, or at least, right, they lost their connection to the kind of stratum of sense, to this everyday life and the life world that we're engaging in. And he explicitly saw this as a problem, that we have this not so much the gap between theory and praxis, because it's kind of a naive gap, it seems, because also, right, the engaging in research and in thinking, whatever this may mean, but it's also like a praxis, right? Of course, there's a certain also a certain backdrop, philosophical, why we distinguish theory and praxis. But he saw that that there is a more fundamental gap that has to do with the theory and praxis scissor in a way, but that really the orientation which scientists were believed they had engaging in the scientific project, so the kind of direction where science is heading, they kind of might had the stance that this direction was a reasonable direction, and that it is settled that to engage in science and to follow the scientific project and the scientific history that lead into science as we today know it, that this was kind of heading in the right direction. This notion of sense is really having an etymological background with the notion in terms of the notion of direction. So if you understand something and you see the sense, or you find the sense in something, you have maybe this aha experience, right? With which indicates that you are going in the right direction. You know that this is the right direction, and because now you see more, if not clearly, but you have a better orientation, and this gives you the kind of intuition or idea or feeling that you had in the right direction, because now you understand more, better, get more grip. You have more grasp on the topic, the problem, the question. So, right, and Husserl saw, or was kind of shattered that in terms of the notion of sense, that or the sense in terms of the orientation of the sciences, was not something that we can easily invoke, or that we can easily find that we will encounter this aha erlebnis, this aha experience. So rather, the whole project of science is moving in a certain direction, or in many directions at once. So perhaps not in one, because it's kind of a emergent system and kind of a autopoietic system, most probably. So it's built on certain principle, and it had some kind of initial thrust to it. It seems, right, a certain reason for doing this and engaging in it, and really carve out that necessity of intersubjectivity and the means to be as objective as possible, or the goal to be as objective as possible, and to have all these regulatives and kind of internal mechanisms to get this going and to counter-check everybody and the experiments and so on, and make the discussion, in the best case, an open discussion. So and concentrate on the matter of sake, the argument, and not about some personal issues, right, or personal problems that researchers have with each other. So really, what is at stake should be at the center, and on the side of what is debated over, right? So it should be a really true debate over a state of affair, and so science was having in a direction, in a way. So and even if it's like this huge enterprise with so many people invested into it, and right, also people with different positions and opinions and different kind of backdrops, but the kind of problem on a really basic level, that they should, right, that one thought maybe Husserl thought that there was something they share, right, and he speaks in terms, or he marks this problem specifically in regard of geometry, right? He has a background as a trained mathematician, and he gives the example, at least, that right, concerning the root or the origin of geometry. This is an essay he wrote in his later work. So he is concerned with, and he goes back to the first geometers, right? Which you're not the first. Maybe you don't find in ancient Greece, but you find some really famous ancient Greece geometers like Euclid, for example, and right, he asks back to the origin of geometry, right? Geometry is a discipline, it seems, which is some kind of the teaching of space or of spatial relations, and kind of try to work out and uncover or unveil certain principles in terms of spatiality, which enables us not only to do mathematics in form that is illustrative and demonstrative, and that can be brought into a gestalt, a form, a intuitable content, right? So you don't necessarily have to draw lines to engage in Euclidean geometry, but you can do algebra also later was shown, I mean much later, but basically he carves out that what Euclid is doing is really formalizing these principles and kind of stripping them off from their intuitable illustrative and demonstrative content. So something that could be intuited in terms of a form or a gestalt, something, with these minimal Euclidean forms of point and line. So really abstract forms, but nevertheless forms. And but then again, they were to a higher degree then peeled off their concrete intuitable content, in the sense that we wouldn't have any illustrative demonstration, that you can point to, or that you can gesture towards, and kind of countercheck, in the sense that you can see what is going on there, and if what is the claim is the case, if it is true by means of following it with your inner eye, and but not only in terms of your inner eye, but directing your inner eye to in quotation marks to the forms that you kind of intuit on the paper, for example, or on the ground, right? On some kind of drawn into the sand, for example. So, right, you have something like the sentence of Pythagoras, or the law of Pythagoras, I think it's called, where the degree of angle in specific triangles is always the sum of the degree is 180. And in the beginning, right, so when we ask after the beginning of geometry, it's kind of it seems the intuitively understanding that the geometers invoked in terms of showcasing their proofs, and kind of bringing their knowledge to other people. That they had ropes and they had like sticks. At least this is kind of how Husserl describes it, or thinks about it, so that they could show all kinds of these different triangles, and also people could make up all kinds of different triangles, and see if they fitted the kind of sentence and principles of the Pythagoreans. And so if the sentence holds up to its claim, and has the kind of consistency and coherence that the Pythagoreans invoked therewith, and or if it can be proven otherwise, if they can be really put into action a triangle that dismisses the sentence, right? That shows another illustrative demonstration, and that counterproves or gives a counterexample to the sentence, right? But in this sense, the person witnessing could really follow through with a look and a sight into the matter itself, into the sense of the proof. They could follow the sentence and the proof, and into this that they were engaging and what was going on there in terms of the scientific project. It seems that they were kind of moving in a stratum where there could be meaningful, fulfilling content, right? The sense that was invoked there, so the direction, and that they were shown with the Pythagoreans showed other peoples in terms of this sentence. So there was a certain orientation point they gave, a certain anchor or a certain direction invoked, and now people could kind of they could look after if this direction really was sound, was working out and playing itself out like the Pythagoreans claimed. And now they could do this by intuiting and really get at the sense dimension, and kind of there was something breaking up, like in a positive sense. There was something disclosing itself in the best case, for example, with Euclid or the Pythagoreans, that people were finding, okay, it seems that it's sound. We cannot come up with other examples, and all the triangles we can come up with serve or obey this law or this sentence, this principle. And it's also helpful then for everyday life, so we can build buildings with it, and we can make use of it, we can apply it, and we can the meaning invoke the kind of invoked meaningful content or sense is holding up to the claim. The proof is fulfilling itself, and the sense is kind of disclosed and shines through, shows itself, discloses something, some dimensioning, where the people found it to be meaningful, and that it has a certain sense to it, and so they could, with with something they had at their hands, they could say, okay, this is going in the right direction. So now what Husserl is describing is that geometry would have to become capable at some point of entering into history. And this means, right, this has several implications, but for example, one implication is that you would have to write down or kind of convey the proofs themselves and the principles, and how you derive them, or how you kind of conduct the proof, how the proofs are done, how you have to proceed to show yourself or somebody else after the death of the author, and in this way prove to the next generations that the proofs and the principles can be repeated, and the next generation can look for themselves if what is written down or what is delivered over and what was worked out before in the past is really a serious proof, or if it's flawed, they could find of themselves. So maybe it was just an approximation, but overall there may be some flaw to it because somebody else can counterproof it. So, and this is something that was done so in terms of the Euclidean principles, the principles of Euclidean geometry, of the space Euclid invoked, the space of intuition, or the intuition that space has 3 dimensions that you can, engage in, and that you find in your experience of the world, in your world access, and that can be formalized, and that when you put a stick in the ground and mark a point and span a rope, that is kind of like a line, and you can have something, this kind of some rope or something elastic between those sticks, and you can again invoke the proof and try out all kinds of different variations of triangles to look if you can find a counterexample, or if the proof proves itself to be continuously right. It's nearly impossible, as you perhaps also suffered through, to try out every variation, but nevertheless, this kind of space of intuition, Euclidean space, with the principles, the formalized principles of Euclid, they have a certain, it seems, certain necessity to them, in that their status seems to be axiomatic, in the sense that when you have this homogeneous space that is isotropic, where you can have perfect forms, idealized forms like squares, or triangles that you wouldn't find in nature in this perfect shape, but that you can put into this Euclidean space, or construct in this Euclidean space, and then kind of mirror in all possible direction, and they stay exactly the same. And they stay invariant to all kinds of transformations and situations. So they're situation invariant, and it seems to some degree time invariant, that they stay identical due to time and due to shifts in time, right? So, and then you have this one principle which is the principle, or the axiom of the parallel lines. So if you have 2 points on that are not on the same line, but they are on 2 lines that are running parallel, and the question if they will ever countersect in that Euclidean space, right? Or if they would run into infinity while not meeting each other. Because this is a question that you come up with if this space that you are invoking there is homogeneous and infinite and isotropic, so invariant against all kinds of mirroring operations. So will these 2 lines ever intersect? This is something that the parallel axiom invokes, or a question that it brings up. And if and there's a certain weight to this axiom, because if the axiom is right, then we'll never met. But as the Euclidean space is so much so, it seems the space of our intuition, so that space has 3 dimensions and is in certain way homogeneous, and it seems has a certain dimensioning to it. So there seems to be some connection to our everyday space, with spatiality, which we would call perhaps real space, right? And if the kind of intuitive space is aligned or is equal with this real world space. So, and then much later we had to notice that with Einstein and Minkowski, a physician and a mathematician, right? That it is rather the case that that the lines most probably countersect in real space, because we have real masses that influence space and time, that are not independent of matter, right? And of the effects of gravity, or the implications of gravity. So a lot of people were investigating into that, right? Mathematics and physics, and also philosophers. So that there is not only a Euclidean geometry, but also a non-Euclidean geometry, and that there's not only Galileo transformation, but also a non-Galilean transformation, I think it's called. So that there are different forms of geometry which you can describe on a more abstract level, which is what Minkowski was doing in terms of metrical formalization of different forms of geometry and spatiality. There's a lot to be said about that, right? Mainly this is also the kind of conclusion that we are not talking about absolute space or absolute time anymore as some overarching container or some absolute relation, some overarching nexus, but about space-time and the continuum of space-time, where there's a certain banding going on, which means that the parallel axiom would not hold in the space that is in reality, or in terms of the physical world, influenced by real masses, and differs from the space of our intuition, where we cannot invoke these real masses, and that is, in that sense, our intuition is not directly affected by them. So, right, that something is that there is a gravitas to the physical world, and that there is a gravitational field, and this means that there are all kind of bandings going on, but also of a binding, a structuring in terms of gravitation, right? Gravitation is also, it seems, in a way, structuring this space-time, and there's a hanging together of space, time, matter, and gravitation. So, and the point is that a space of intuition was shown in a certain sense to differ from the physical space, at least. So because, as I said, it's not influenced, it's not it doesn't hold these real masses, or we are not holding and burying these real masses in the physical sense in our intuitions, or in our representations, in our illustrative demonstrations. So in all kinds of activities where we bring something up in terms of picturing it, of giving it some form, some gestalt, in terms of our inner eye, as one says. And so the specificity to that there are no real masses in terms of our intuitions and in terms of our representations, that is kind of influencing this spatiality, the representational spatiality, where we do engage in illustrative demonstrations of certain proofs, where we picture certain kind of affairs, or where pictures popping up when somebody explains us something, or some notion gets invoked, right? And right, so, and going back to Husserl, right, he's asking back to the origin, the root of geometry, how it comes about, how it's entering the stage, and that it has to become at some point, capable of entering history, and this has certain conditions to be written down, to be put into formalization, symbolization, to be put into the form of principles, of axioms, so that other people can build up on that and can counterprove these basic axioms and work with them further also. And so these axioms are then entering history and are delivered over, and the formalization of this space of intuition by Euclid was delivered over too, till then Einstein and Minkowski come around and kind of show the difference and the differing cleavage between the space of intuition, or this ideal space, and the physical space that they are working in, or that they are working in terms of in terms of applying their geometry to physical experiments and physical observations and measurements. So towards this temporal spatiality, which is fulfilled by masses, it seems. So and Einstein developed in his theory of relativity that there is no absolute space, like Newton may still have been in need to draw on, or to invoke at least, right? He's also speaking about relative space, but he's still invoking or implicitly drawing on this notion that there is something like an overarching container, is what Einstein calls it, in terms of referring to Newton, but an overarching nexus, or some medium that kind of holds and is kind of the environment for the relative space and the relative motions, and then gives the possibility to speak about absolute motions, right? He brings this up in terms of the jug that is rotating in a laboratory, and that will, at first, the jug will rotate, but the water will not rotate. But at some point, also the water in the jug will rotate, and at one point, then the jug is not rotating anymore, but the water inside the jug is rotating. And this phenomenon, which is observable, then was explained by Newton in terms of being traced back, or it could be traced back, according to Newton, to the existence of absolute motion. In this way, also implicitly drawing on an absolute space.